Hey guys, tonight we slip into the woven mats of a distant court, somewhere deep in 16th century Central Africa, where the humid air buzzes with a soft click of beads, the rustle of raffia skirts, and the lazy flick of a fan made from eagle feathers. In this glowing palace, surrounded by wooden pillars etched with ancestor spirits and guarded by silent men gripping ivory-handled blades, a baby lets out her first royal wail. The child is Queen Nzinga, though at the moment she's just wriggling through her first breaths. Her arrival already feels charged. She's born into the royal household in Dongo, a kingdom nestled between rolling grasslands and rivers you could nap beside for hours. The story goes that she was born with the umbilical cord wrapped tightly around her neck, an omen, not great for her mother. But to the spiritual advisors, this meant the child was destined for greatness, or strangulation. Historians still argue whether the symbolism was interpreted as divine warning or mystical validation. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I'm curious who else is joining this journey in the dark. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You breathe deeply as you shuffle across the mosaic floors of this palace. You've arrived just in time to witness Nzinga's entry into a world, dramatic, unbothered, and already late to her own birth. Her father is Ngola Kalonji Kiasamba, the ruling monarch or Ngola of Ndongo. His authority stretches across a realm marked by tangled forests, slow-moving rivers, and complicated diplomacy with European merchants who never seem to stop asking where the gold is. The court is a place of strict etiquette and abundant gossip. You notice how the palace workers try not to whisper too loudly near the royal nursery, but you still catch fragments. Some say this child will outshine her brothers. Others think the cord around her neck is a curse. But the midwife, old and crusty like a gourd left too long in the sun, says, "The spirits are funny. They give you what you need, even when it's inconvenient." As you follow the rhythms of this court, you start to see how deeply ritual weaves into the daily life here. Every morning starts with offerings to ancestors, millet cakes, palm wine, a few feathers left near the shrine, and end with debates over court protocol. Even a baby's naming ceremony is political. Nzinga's name is chosen to reflect her difficult birth. It literally means to twist or to struggle. One court poet calls it an elegant way of saying she came into this world like a tangled necklace. The people of Ndongo are proud, careful, and deeply aware that their kingdom is not isolated. To the west, Portuguese traders and settlers creep inland from Luanda, sniffing around for more than just spices and ivory. To the east, rival kingdoms shift alliances like wind-blown grass. A child like Nzinga is born into the soup of ceremony and subterfuge. Back in the nursery, she kicks her legs and stares at the ceiling like she's judging the architecture. The ceiling is made from carved wood painted in deep reds and blacks, colors of the living and the dead. One panel shows a lion devouring a snake. Another shows a woman with birds for hair. By the time Nzinga learns to crawl, her older siblings are already caught in political grooming. Her brother, Mband, is expected to take the throne. Another brother has already offended a general by accidentally kicking over a ceremonial drum. You try not to laugh. Palace life seems exhausting when you're under 4 feet tall. But Nzinga, even as a toddler, doesn't just toddle. She listens. She watches. She memorizes the order in which the court advisors bow to her father. She mimics them behind a palm tree later that afternoon. You catch her once, practicing royal speeches into a gourd like it's a microphone. One night, thunder claps loud enough to startle the geese outside the compound. Nzinga is wide awake. A nursemaid tells her a story about a woman warrior who once fought off 5 crocodiles with a stick and a song. Nzinga doesn't blink. She just says, "Why, only 5. By age 6, she's learning languages, Kimbundu first, but also a smattering of Portuguese taught by a half-Boer missionary who smells like pickled fish. She finds Portuguese boring but useful. She also finds that the missionary can be bribed with dried mango strips. One afternoon, after trading 2 strips for a swear word, she hides behind a tapestry and recites it to a startled noble. Palace officials write her off as a clever child, which is code for mildly concerning. Her father sees something else. He takes her to military drills. While her brothers try to pretend they enjoy sparring, Nzinga asks for a bigger spear. The court begins to hum with quiet predictions. Some servants think she's a reincarnation of a warrior queen who once commanded bees. Others say she has too many questions. Still others note that she prefers facts to flattery, a dangerous preference in any royal court. One night, during a feast with distant cousins and loosely aligned nobles, a guest presents a gift of rare blue salt. Nzinga inspects it with the exaggerated calm of someone who knows this might be poisoned. She says nothing but doesn't let her father eat it. Later, a court chef tests it and quietly removes it. No fanfare. Just one more evening where the baby of the family saves the king's life. She doesn't brag. She just goes back to playing a game involving pebbles and very specific rules that only she understands. Already, you can see it, the shaping of someone who will bend history into strange spirals, who will twist politics like she twisted herself out of the womb, who will sit in rooms with generals and missionaries and governors and never blink first. You lie back now, surrounded by whispers and the soft slap of palm leaves against wooden beams. The air smells like river reeds and roasted nuts. Nzinga is asleep. Finally, one tiny hand curled into a fist beside her cheek. You stir just a little, hearing the lazy drone of insects in the humid grassland outside the royal compound. The rhythms of Ndongo don't pause, not even for sleep. Somewhere in the next chamber, a ceremonial drum is being tightened for tomorrow's sunrise rituals. But you, of course, have the better assignment. Watching Nzinga grow into a 10-year-old with sharper questions than most ministers. You find her sitting cross-legged on a woven mat, watching a court scribe demonstrate how to write on bark cloth. She listens without interrupting, then asks why the word for power looks like the word for burden. The scribe stutters something about etymology, but Nzinga isn't satisfied. She begins copying the letters anyway, tongue between her teeth, like someone who doesn't just want to learn but intends to weaponize knowledge. Her father, Ngola Kaluanji, still rules, but he's aging. You can see it in the way he squints at maps and leans heavier on his ceremonial staff. His reign has been turbulent, not because he was weak, but because Portuguese interests have begun burrowing deeper into the region like termites into the palace beams. They want slaves. They want land. They want control of the Kwanzaa River. And they always ask with a smile first. Now Nzinga watches the foreign ambassadors with the same caution she gave that sketchy blue salt. One particularly bold envoy tries to gift her a lace fan. She accepts it with both hands, bows politely, then drops in the puddle behind a palm pot. You suspect it wasn't an accident. Historians still argue whether Nzinga received any formal military training in these early years, but the evidence is deliciously ambiguous. She's often seen near soldiers, often caught copying their footwork or asking how to hold a javelin without looking like a chicken. That's her phrase, not yours. And of course, chickens come up a lot. You pass a courtyard where Nzinga is teaching a hen to walk in a straight line. When asked why, she shrugs. If I can teach a chicken, I can teach an army. The logic isn't flawless, but the determination is impressive. By age 12, she's joining her father at regional councils, ostensibly to observe, but she's not exactly quiet. At one meeting, she corrects a noble's math about tributary yields. The noble coughs awkwardly. Her father hides a smile behind his cup. You notice she's also begun developing a flair for symbolism. When a visiting chief gifts her a small bronze bird statue, an allegory for watchfulness, she positions at the edge of her sleeping mat, facing the door. Whether she believes in magical protection or just wants her servants to know she notices everything, well, that's part of her charm. Ambiguity, weaponized. There's a particular day that lingers. A regional conflict flares up along the eastern borders of Ndongo, where vassal chiefs are growing restless. Her father must choose whether to send troops or diplomacy. Nzinga recommends both. A peace envoy who can delay while a military column positions itself nearby. She's 13. The plan works. Barely anyone credits her. Back in the women's quarters, she's still considered not yet marriageable. It's said with a mixture of relief and apprehension. There's a growing unease among her extended family. Nzinga is clever, yes, and valuable, sure, but also disruptive. Too sharp, too direct, too unafraid of the spaces where power hides its face. At 14, she interrupts a storyteller who gets a historical date wrong. Not maliciously, she's just that kind of annoying genius. The storyteller laughs it off, but you can feel the chill ripple through the room. No one likes being corrected by a child, especially not in public. But she doesn't care. She says, truth should be louder than ego, then goes back to picking her teeth with a mango leaf. One day, she sneaks away with a servant boy and climbs a hill overlooking the Kwanzaa River. From there, you can see the water snake through valleys thick with mist and banana trees. She squints at a Portuguese fort in the distance and says, one day they'll bow when they see me. The servant boy says, but you're a girl. Nzinga smiles. So what? It's not just sass. It's prophecy wrapped in puberty. There's a fringe detail most historians avoid, a rumor that Nzinga had a habit of talking statues. Not casually, full-blown conversations, particularly with a carved wooden mother goddess kept in a private alcove near her chambers. One court made claim Nzinga once asked the statue whether her destiny would involve blood or honey. Supposedly, the statue didn't answer. Or maybe it did, just not in words. Historians still debate whether this behavior was superstition, spiritual discipline, or just her way of processing loneliness. Royal life, after all, is not always glamorous. You're surrounded by people, yet constantly isolated by expectations, protocol, and politics that slap like wet towels. On her 15th birthday, she's gifted a ceremonial dagger, silver blade, antelope horn handle, meant as a symbol, not a weapon, but you notice she doesn't treat it like decoration. She keeps it under her sleeping mat, just in case someone forgets that royal girls are still royalty. That night, a feast is held in her honor. Drums beat slow, candles flicker in gourds. The air smells like roasted cassava and river mint. She dances elegantly, like someone who understands that her body is also a message. She's not just celebrating. She's announcing, here I am. I've arrived. Adjust accordingly. You lie there now, the air warm against your skin, the night deepening like ink spilled on old maps. Nzinga's kingdom is still whole, for now. Her father still reigns, for now. But the pace of change is picking up. And Nzinga? She's sharpening. Her mind, her tongue, and probably that dagger. She hasn't made her move yet. But trust, you'll know when she does. You wake slowly to the sound of distant gongs. Steady, somber, spaced just enough to sound ceremonial but ominous. That's how things always shift, isn't it? Not in a whirlwind, but with a slow drumbeat of inevitability. Nzinga's father is dying. He isn't gone yet, but the whispers thicken like the humid air before a thunderstorm. You wander the palace and catch snippets of courtiers discussing alliances, succession, Portuguese treaties, and which noble is hiding which cousin in which hut. No one says Nzinga's name directly, but her presence hums beneath every breath. She's 16 now, and she's watching her older brother, Mbandi, flex new muscles he hasn't yet earned, watching her aunts argue in the women's quarters over inheritance and ritual, watching the priests mutter to their sacred bundles a little longer than usual. And she's watching you, too, with that unblinking gaze that says she's reading you like a coded report. When the king finally dies, the court slips into an uneasy theater of grief. Mourners wail, just loud enough to be noticed. The kitchen staff prepares stews no one eats. And Mbandi steps into power with the confidence of someone who knows the rules. But not the game. Officially, he's crowned Gola, a title meaning king, but heavy with spiritual weight. Unofficially, everyone's waiting to see what he'll do with his sister. At first, it seems like peace. Nzinga continues to advise on minor matters. She sits quietly during council sessions, speaking only when spoken to, her eyes lowered in just the right ratio of respect to boredom. But then come the Portuguese. They return with new demands. They want exclusive rights to trade slaves along the Kwanzaa River. They want military support against local rebellions they helped ignite. And they want tribute, always more tribute. Sugar gold ivory people. Bandy panics. You watch him pacing, chewing his thumb, muttering to advisors like a man who's just realized the crown is heavier than his spine. And who does he call? That's right, his difficult sister. Now here comes the part historians love, the fateful embassy. Bandy sends Nzinga as his personal envoy to negotiate with the Portuguese in Luanda, a calculated gamble. She's brilliant, yes, but she's also a woman, and the Europeans might underestimate her. Spoiler, they do. She arrives draped in royal cloth dyed with tree bark and ash. Her face is painted with white clay and lines that mimic war paint, but subtler, like she's saying, "I'm not fighting you." Yet, she's received by the Portuguese governor, who offers her a mat on the floor to sit. An insult, a power move, a test. She pauses, breathes, then signals to her attendants, who slide a servant forward on all fours. Nzinga steps calmly onto his back and sits down at eye level with the governor. No raised voice, no outburst, just that smooth, slow seat of power. Historians still argue whether this moment was spontaneous genius or choreographed in advance. Either way, it works. The Portuguese respect her, or fear her, or both. Negotiations shift. She secures a tentative peace. Bandy stays on the throne, but everyone knows who's really holding the pen. You return with her to the capital. She's quiet during the journey, occasionally feeding dried mango to a parrot that won't stop repeating the word taxes. It's a gift from the Portuguese, and you're starting to suspect it's not just a bird. It's a surveillance device in feathers. When the council gathers to praise her success, Nzinga deflects. The king made the deal, she says. I was merely the messenger. But the glint in her eyes says otherwise. Back at court, Bandy grows twitchier. He suspects her, resents her, maybe even fears her. He strips her of official duties, bans her from meetings, assigns guards to escort her everywhere. And still, she waits, bides her time, feeds the parrot, sharpens a dagger under her mat, and then, yes, things go sideways. Bandy orders the assassination of rivals. Not uncommon, but sloppily done. Blood in the wrong places. Eyes watching who shouldn't. Rumors that he poisoned Nzinga's infant nephew to eliminate a future threat. That one sticks in your throat. No one can prove it, but Nzinga doesn't deny it. She just gets quieter. Historians still debate whether she fled or was banished. Either way, she's gone. Just like that. Out of the palace. Out of Luanda. Into the borderlands between chaos and strategy. A political exile with a memory like a ledger and patience like dry season before the storm. You follow her into exile. The terrain roughens. The food worsens. Cassava root, dried fish, and river snails. She eats simply, sparingly, but she keeps herself clean, her clothes neat, her posture queenly. She doesn't look beaten. She looks paused. By now, she's around 27. Prime age for marriage, alliance, or retreat. She chooses none of the above. Instead, she begins building her own court, smaller, rougher, mobile, like a kingdom that fits inside a tent and can move faster than betrayal. Here, among displaced nobles and refugees, she crafts a new image. Not a sideline sister, but a ruler in her own right. She adopts Catholicism, not out of spiritual awakening, but because it offers diplomatic leverage. Converts bring protection. Crosses soothe Portuguese consciences. And baptism opens doors. She takes the Christian name, Anna, but you'll notice she never drops Nzinga. That's who she is. Anna is just camouflage. A cloak for when the wolves sniff near. She preaches unity, even as factions bicker. She trains women as warriors, begins learning foreign tongues, and keeps that parrot, yes, it's still alive, though now it only says, wait. And so you wait, too, perched on the edge of history, watching a woman spin exile into empire, shame into strategy, and silence into a sharpened whisper. She hasn't made her move yet, but any moment now, she will. You blink, and years pass. Dust settles on old alliances, while new ones form like moss, quiet, slow, and creeping. Nzinga, ever the strategist, doesn't storm Luanda in some dramatic thunderclap. No, she builds her power the way vines climb trees, wrapping, twisting, waiting. Word spreads across the region that the exiled princess is no longer simply surviving. She's thriving. You ride with her from village to village, watching as she meets with displaced nobles, ambitious generals, suspicious chiefs. She listens more than she speaks. And when she does speak, her voice is honey-coated iron. You notice the ranks growing. Her court now includes not only fellow exiles from Ndongo, but also mercenaries, defectors, and at least 3 sorcerers who argue constantly about weather magic. One of them claims to have spoken to an ancestral spirit living inside a very untrustworthy chicken. The chicken pecks everyone but Nzinga, but even chickens have roles in empires. In this swirl of alliances, Nzinga begins claiming titles. Not princess, not even queen, but Ngola, the very name her brother had once claimed. And you see what she's doing. She's redefining legitimacy. Power doesn't come from blood or coronation. It comes from being the one who shows up every single day and makes other people's problems disappear. Around this time, you hear whispers, real whispers, not just palace gossip, that Mbandi's health is slipping. There's no evidence, just the way people say his name with a lowered voice, the way no one lights a lamp near his compound at night, the way even the parrots, yes, more parrots, stop repeating his orders. And then he's dead. The records are fuzzy. Historians still argue whether Nzinga poisoned him, pressured him into suicide, or if he simply succumbed to illness and paranoia. Officially, he dies alone, childless, and unloved. Unofficially, the road is now clear, and so Nzinga returns, not quietly, but not with a parade either. She arrives at the capital of Ndongo dressed in black. Flanked by warriors in ceremonial white, she walks barefoot through the city gates, not to show humility, but to remind everyone that her path was carved with her own 2 feet. There's a debate now. The Ndongo elite, those who haven't fled, been murdered, or mysteriously vanished, aren't entirely sure what to do with her. Some still insist that women can't rule. Others argue she's the only reason the kingdom still exists at all. So she improvises. Nzinga stages a public ritual declaring herself queen, not just regent or caretaker, but full sovereign. She invokes her lineage, cites ancestral spirits, and quotes the Bible, all in the same speech. You stand behind her, swatting flies and thinking, wow, she really is doing this. And people believe her. Or, at least, they pretend to. Power is a performance, after all. And Nzinga is putting on the show of her life. She doesn't stop at ritual. She begins restructuring the administration, redistributing land, appointing new chiefs, elevating formerly minor figures into positions of trust. Some say this was out of necessity. Others say it was revenge. But mostly it was strategy. A new queen needs new loyalty. And then she does something unexpected. She reaches out to the Portuguese again. You raise an eyebrow, maybe 2. After everything? After the betrayal, the insults, the demands? Yes, because Nzinga understands leverage. She offers him cooperation, even conversion, in exchange for recognition and support. She gets baptized again and throws a lavish celebration where the local wine flows like river water. At this party, someone gives her a carved ivory chair inlaid with silver. She doesn't sit in it, not yet, but she places it beside her travel mat and smiles. One day, she says, when I no longer need to move, but the peace is fragile. The Portuguese say all the right things, but you notice their smiles don't reach their eyes. And the Dutch are arriving now too, sneaking up the coast like opportunistic crabs. Nzinga, ever the multitasker, sends envoys to both. A love triangle made of cannons and trade agreements. Meanwhile, the kingdom is recovering, but just barely. The slave trade has gutted entire communities. Crops fail under unpredictable rains. Refugees shuffle through the countryside like ghosts. And you realize something chilling. Nzinga isn't ruling a kingdom. She's ruling a wound. And yet, she keeps going. She rides daily through the capital, greeting commoners, accepting gifts, settling disputes. She attends Mass in the morning and consults spirit mediums by candlelight at night. Her court becomes a blend of Christian symbols and indigenous rituals. A priest might bless the harvest, while a local shaman buries a chicken skull in the field just to be safe. She trains a bodyguard unit made entirely of women, loyal, fierce, and allegedly trained to fight while holding clay pots on their heads. One of them, you notice, always carries a flute. You ask her why. She says, music kills fear faster than steel. You nod and never bring it up again. There's also a new pet in the palace, a goat named Father Joachim. He's neither ordained nor particularly holy, but he does enjoy attending council meetings. Nzinga claims he keeps people honest. You suspect he just likes the snacks. And all the while, the pressure builds. The Portuguese tighten their grip. The Dutch whisper promises. Local rebellions flare up like brush fires. And Nzinga just smiles and sharpens her strategies. You watch her map out plans on a hide stretched over floor. She moves ivory pieces, villages, roads, generals, with slow precision. Then she pauses, stares into the distance, and whispers, "This time we don't wait, because the pause is over. The exile is done. And the war, oh yes, the real war, is about to begin." The air thickens with the scent of iron and rain, and you don't even need a royal decree to know. The fighting season has begun. Nzinga moves like wind through dry grass, sudden, relentless, and impossible to predict. Her forces strike out from the capital not in a grand march, but in dozens of little pricks across the map. Ambushes, raids, deceptively polite emissaries bearing swords tucked beneath cloaks. You trail behind her, often literally, trudging up muddy hills to overhear her calmly discussing river crossings and troop fatigue over a bowl of sour millet. She barely sleeps. Her generals barely argue. And her enemies? Well, they barely hold the line. The Portuguese are stunned at first. This woman, who, they thought, was too busy converting and flattering and diplomatically existing, is now knocking on their fort doors with battering rams made from local trees and strategy. She has one goal: to reclaim her people, not just the living ones, but the ones stolen, the ones chained and sold along riverbanks and coastlines like sacks of peppercorn. She sends word to slave raiders, "Stop or join me." Many laugh. A few listen. Most disappear. Some reappear later with dramatically fewer limbs. And this is where the forests begin to speak. You walk with Nzinga into territories where no formal roads exist, just shadow and brush. The Mbunda guides never use maps, only memory and the shape of certain trees. You pass villages at shift location every season, as if they, too, are evading capture. It's a guerrilla war now, and Nzinga thrives in it. She relocates her entire court to a mobile camp deep in the interior. Historians still argue whether this was strategic brilliance or sheer necessity, but the result is the same. Her power no longer depends on palaces or port cities. Her court can vanish into the woods and reappear 100 miles away by morning. The new royal compound is equal parts command center, spiritual haven, and low-key jungle rave. There's drumming most nights. Offerings are made in palm leaf baskets. You once spot a general reading a Latin prayer book beside a carved wooden statue of a fertility spirit. Nobody blinks. Nzinga governs from a shaded stool beneath a canopy of barkcloth and vines. Her throne? A carved wooden platform raised just high enough that visitors must look up at her. One unlucky messenger tries to kneel before delivering news. Nzinga lifts his chin with a spear tip and says, "Speak like someone who knows they won't be killed for this." The man swallows loudly, then speaks. Still, it isn't all victories and coconut wine. Supplies run low. Soldiers go missing. Entire units get swallowed by rivers during flash floods. And the Portuguese? They retaliate with brutal efficiency. Fortresses are reinforced. African collaborators are paid handsomely. Jesuit priests are sent to preach peace, but somehow always report on Nzinga's movements. And then, just as your boots dry out and you think maybe this pace will hold, Nzinga switches tactics again. She allies with the Dutch. Yes, those Dutch. The ones in starched collars and alarming hats who've been circling the Atlantic coast like mildly polite vultures. They offer her weapons, ships, and trade opportunities. She offers them strategic positioning and the chance to annoy the Portuguese. You're in the room when the deal goes down. There's tea, There's tense small talk, and there's one Dutch envoy who nervously pats his mustache every 90 seconds. Nzinga, meanwhile, speaks through translators and never breaks eye contact. When it ends, she toasts with palm wine and murmurs, "Sometimes enemies come gift-wrapped. Now she has muskets. Real ones, not rusted hand-me-downs or badly repaired knockoffs." Her army learns quickly, mostly through trial and error, and sometimes loud, smoky error. But within months, you watch young soldiers drilling with eerie synchronization. Meanwhile, Nzinga leverages a Dutch connection to disrupt Portuguese trade routes. She attacks slaver camps. She reroutes caravans. She makes it incredibly inconvenient to be an enemy, which, let's face it, is a kind of military genius that deserves at least one solid nap. And yet it still isn't enough. Her kingdom, if you can even call it that, since it now moves every month like a particularly irritable parade, is under constant threat. The slave trade is too profitable. The Portuguese are too entrenched. And her allies, they're always listening for better offers. There's a pause now, the kind that hums between one storm and the next. You sit beneath a baobab tree and listen to Nzinga chant with the elders. The song is old, older than the kingdom itself. And you wonder how many rulers have sat in the same dust, wondering if it was all worth it. Later that night, over cassava cakes and smoked fish, Nzinga admits to her closest aides that this war, this endless, shifting, grinding resistance, may outlive them all. But if we stop, she says, we become furniture in their castles. I'd rather be thunder. One aide asks if she ever misses the capital. The silk gowns, the carved ivory bath. Nzinga just laughs. "I never bathed in peace," she replies, "only in preparation." You glance at her hands, calloused, ink-stained, and strong. The hands of a queen, a general, a negotiator, a mother to a kingdom made of refugees and rage. And as another season turns, Nzinga prepares again. She orders new fortifications. She sends more spies. She holds another ceremony, this time under a moonless sky, and sacrifices a white rooster while speaking the names of her ancestors in a voice so low it trembles the leaves. The battle drums haven't stopped since she returned to power. They just beat softer now, like a heartbeat under layers of moss and memory. You fall asleep to the rhythm of them, wondering what tomorrow will cost and what Nzinga will make of it. You wake to birdsong, but not the cheerful kind that comes with dew and optimism, more like the shrill gossip of jungle parrots announcing that something, or someone, important is on the move. And they're right. Queen Nzinga is already dressed in dark indigo, with ceremonial beads wound tight around her neck like strategic punctuation. She has summoned you before sunrise to witness a royal decree. Not that it's glamorous. You're seated on a slightly damp log, chewing a leaf someone swore would wake you up faster than coffee. It doesn't. But Nzinga's voice does. She's dictating new orders, tax reform, food rationing adjustments, stricter codes for her ever-growing army. There's a specific note about yam distribution that sparks a heated debate among her advisors, two of whom nearly come to blows over whether boiled or roasted yields more psychological satisfaction. You glance at Nzinga. She's smiling faintly. The bureaucratic bickering seems to relax her. By this point, her mobile kingdom has become something between a military camp and a caravan of resilience. Courtiers sleep under woven tents. Livestock follow in separate columns. Children are taught to read beside trenches. Her scribes, always busy, use folded bark and imported parchment to record treaties, taxes, and yes, the occasional romantic poem slipped in when they think she's not looking. Spoiler. She's always looking. And the jungle is part of the court now. Vines curl along council meeting perimeters. Frogs interrupt legal proceedings with loud belches. One minister has adopted a monkey that screams every time someone lies, which means it basically never shuts up. Nzinga lets it stay. This wilderness reign, if you can call it that, is radical. Historians still argue whether Nzinga's mobile governance was a necessary retreat or a revolutionary form of statecraft, adaptive, resistant, impossible to conquer because it refused to stay still. But either way, it works. One afternoon, you watch her oversee a tribunal under a kapok tree. A local chief stands accused of collaborating with Portuguese slavers. The evidence? Suspiciously large quantities of salt and cloth, and one Portuguese pistol hidden under a mattress. The verdict comes fast. Guilty. His punishment isn't execution, though. Nzinga strips him of titles and reassigns him as a mule handler. The symbolism doesn't miss anyone. You keep walking. You keep watching. Nzinga's command style is deeply personal. She knows the names of her captains, their siblings, even their favorite songs. She takes complaints directly. Soldiers call her Ngola, but with warmth, not fear. Still, she's not soft. At least 3 high-ranking officials mysteriously vanish after failing to deliver on their duties. No one brings them up again. Not even the monkey. And while all this internal management plays out, external threats continue. Portuguese forces push harder. They've started torching border villages and using proxy groups to sneak past Nzinga's defenses. One morning, smoke blackens the horizon. She stares at it without blinking. "We'll rebuild," she says flatly, "and make them pay for every straw." That night, Nzinga leads a midnight raid. You're there, or rather, near enough to hear the grunts, the metal, the panicked shouting of men who thought they were safe under European flags. The queen herself doesn't swing a sword, but she directs with eerie precision. She seems to know, instinctively, when a flank will falter or a scout will freeze. Her voice slices through chaos. You hear her say, "Flank left. Fire after the drum. Don't miss." And they don't. It's a small victory, but it sends a message. She's still out here. She's not going anywhere. And she's getting smarter. The Dutch, sensing opportunity, renew their support. Nzinga sends back messages wrapped in barkcloth and sugarcane. It's all very poetic, until one letter includes a coded request for 10 barrels of gunpowder and a cart less rickety than last time. Diplomatic flair aside, Nzinga's real talent lies in the long game. She starts grooming new leaders, young warriors, some barely old enough to remember a time without war. She teaches them not just how to fight, but how to listen, how to negotiate, how to stall for time until the river floods or the Portuguese get bored. One of these protégés is a girl with a scar down her cheek and a laugh like a bird call. Nzinga takes her under wing, sparring with her in mock battles and letting her deliver minor rulings. The girl isn't perfect. Once she misquotes a proverb during a council meeting and earns a week of latrine duty. But she's learning, fast, and so is everyone else. The makeshift schools Nzinga has set up are thriving, despite the constant relocations. Lessons in literacy are taught alongside survival tactics and ancestor worship. Children can recite Portuguese trade terms by day and lead spirit invocations by night. One of them draws a chalk portrait of Nzinga during free time. It's wildly inaccurate. Her ears are enormous and her eyes resemble goat buttons, but Nzinga hangs it in her tent anyway. Through it all, the queen rarely rests. You see her reading documents by torchlight, her face shadowed and tired. Her voice is hoarse from constant orders. She jokes less now. Smiles come slower. There's a weariness creeping in, and you can feel it, too. Even the monkey seems more subdued these days. You sit with her once beside a fire, both of you too exhausted to speak. She hands you a bit of dried mango. "Do you think I'll win?" she asks, not looking at you. And for the first time, you realize she's asking not about battles, but history. "I think you already have," you whisper, though your voice is more ash than conviction. She chuckles. "Don't be poetic. It makes the ghost jealous." A pause. Then she stands, adjusts her cloak, and walks off to prepare the next ambush. And you're left staring into the flames, wondering just how long a person can keep this up before even thunder gets tired. The jungle's breath slows overnight, like it too needs a recharge after watching Queen Nzinga micromanage an army, a government, and a makeshift school system. But dawn doesn't wait, and neither does she. You're already back on your feet, brushing ants off your sleeves and nibbling dried cassava that tastes a little too much like someone's sock. Breakfast of champions. Today, you're heading toward Matamba again, or what's left of it. Nzinga's scouts report that the Portuguese are pushing deeper into the territory, and the Queen has decided it's time to reclaim more than just jungle trails and broken forts. It's time to try retaking an actual capital. Bold move, slightly unhinged. Very Nzinga. Her caravan slinks through the thickets, not quite stealthy. Let's face it, dragging oxen, carts, and a full court through foliage is like trying to sneak a parade into a library, but determined. The queen rides in a hammock slung between two tall warriors. She claims it's practical. You suspect she just wants a better view of everyone else's struggle. The return to Matamba is surreal. It's not the same city Nzinga once marched into decades earlier. That Matamba was vibrant, buzzing with traders, ceremonies, gossip, and a clack of polished sandals on stone courtyards. This Matamba is quieter, laced with the ghosts of forgotten power. Vines creep over palace walls. A stone basin meant for rituals now holds rainwater and a single bored frog. Still, Nzinga insists on entering with ceremony. Her musicians play reed flutes and ivory horns, a sound that feels more hopeful than triumphant. Citizens emerge hesitantly from hiding. Some from jungle huts, others from beneath Portuguese-built shelters that they now pretend not to recognize. And just like that, the queen is back on a throne. Sort of. It's a wooden stool draped in goat hide, but symbolism counts. She appoints new officials, mostly from loyal families. She reinstates old laws but adds new wrinkles. One decree mandates that all Matamba children learn to write in both Kimbundu and Portuguese. To know your enemy's tongue is to hold their knife by the handle, she says, sipping millet beer. Historians still argue whether this return to Matamba marked a real consolidation of power or a symbolic act to inspire loyalty among scattered provinces. What's clear is that Nzinga leans into both options. She throws feasts, yes, but also tightens grain distribution. Her charisma, always sharp, becomes almost surgical. She turns every public moment into a performance of control and subtle defiance. You watch her during one of these feasts. She raises a goblet carved from ivory and recites a prayer that blends ancestral worship with a nod to St. Anthony. The mix is deliberate. A Portuguese missionary at the table flinches. Nzinga winks at him. The wine is sour. Not everyone welcomes her back, of course. A rival chief claims she's too old to rule, too compromised by foreign dealings. Nzinga answers with a chess match. Literally, she invites him to a public game, wagers a prize hunting hawk, and demolishes him in 12 moves. The crowd is giddy. The chief leaves quietly. The hawk looks smug. That's Nzinga's diplomacy now. Showmanship and strategy in equal parts. She dispatches letters to the Dutch again, more elegantly worded this time. She suggests shared control of trade routes, a mutually profitable arrangement, and reminds them of her past reliability. They send back compliments, gunpowder, and a barrel of salted herring. She has no idea what to do with the herring, but she stores it anyway. Meanwhile, back in Luanda, the Portuguese are fuming. They're losing face and territory. Worse, Nzinga's rise is making their local allies jittery. Some desert to her side, lured by promises of fair governance and fewer public floggings. Others sit tight, hoping this is just a phase. You and I both know better. Nzinga capitalizes on the tension. She hosts open markets in Matamba, inviting merchants from neighboring states. She lowers tolls on caravan roads. She issues shiny new titles to chiefs willing to pledge loyalty. It's part state building, part psychological warfare. One visitor, a trader from Kazanji, remarks that Nzinga's court now feels more like a European city than an African capital. Her response? That's because they keep trying to sell me their idea of power. I prefer making my own. Her advisors nod. One scratches his head. Another starts sketching what he calls the ideal Matamba coin. It features a lion eating a musket. And through it all, Nzinga is always watching. She inspects food stores personally. She surprises border guards to test their alertness. She intervenes in a marriage dispute just to stop two aristocrats from destabilizing a trade alliance. You get the feeling she doesn't sleep much, but when she does, it's with one hand on a map. There are slow days, too. Rain halts travel. Crops fail in one outlying village. A precious salt shipment spoils. Nzinga's temper shows in tiny ways. A curt nod, a shortened audience, a single skip prayer. But she recalibrates fast. Her strength now isn't just fire and rebellion. It's grit, systems, the long haul. One night, you sit outside her quarters, half asleep, listening to the rhythmic tapping of her stylus on bark parchment. She's writing something long. A treaty? A diary? Maybe a list of people she's planning to outmaneuver next. She pauses only to sip from a gourd of fermented honey water. Eventually, she murmurs, "Do you think Matamba remembers me?" You consider saying something philosophical. Instead, you just nod. She smiles, and for a moment her eyes soften. Then she snuffs the lamp. Rain again. You wake to the steady plop, plop, plop of thick droplets smacking palm leaves and trickling through cracks in your reed roof. The queen, of course, is already awake, holding court under an awning made of woven grass, sipping a strange blend of spice water and crushed baobab seeds. A breakfast only mildly better than the cassava sock special. Nzinga has moved beyond reclaiming cities. Now she's restructuring what it means to be Matamba. It's not just a dusty throne or the haunted courtyards anymore. It's an identity project. And as usual, she's multitasking like an overachieving storm cloud. She orders a census. That's right, an actual, detailed tally of people, livestock, trades, and household salt reserves. Every official is handed a wax tablet and told to start counting, whether the people like it or not. One elderly chief famously throws his tablet into a river, shouting that his goats are between him and the ancestors. He is gently reminded by a visiting envoy that defying Nzinga is very much not an ancestral tradition. His goats get counted. What does she do with this data? She rebalances tribute obligations. Some villages who've been overtaxed for years get a reprieve. Others, who've flown under the radar by exaggerating their war losses, get a surprise visit from the royal tax caravan. You ride along with them once. It's a strange mix of legal procedure and gossip patrol. Mostly you just carry scrolls and pretend to know what you're doing. Historians still argue whether Nzinga's tax reforms were genuinely egalitarian or just a clever way to solidify her grip on unstable regions. What is clear is that more people start cooperating with her rule, not because they're inspired necessarily, but because she's becoming oddly predictable. In a world of backstabbing monarchs and marauding foreigners, predictability is pure gold. She doesn't stop there. Nzinga revives an old regional practice called Ndongo Diakanda, a system of clan mediation councils. But of course, she tweaks it. Traditionally, each clan handled its own business. Now, she rotates council members across clans. Cross-pollination builds stronger flowers, she explains. It also builds fewer coup attempts, but she doesn't say that part out loud. One council disagreement over a pig theft nearly derails the experiment. The pig in question allegedly had a blessed tail, which apparently warded off evil. The case is taken very seriously. After 3 days of testimony and a slightly dramatic reenactment involving a mud sculpture, Nzinga rules that the pig was shared property and must be returned, plus 2 jars of palm wine and damages. The people cheer. The pig, now renamed Justice, becomes a minor folk hero. Meanwhile, European traders don't know what to make of this newly bureaucratic kingdom. They arrive expecting a chaotic frontier and find order. Spreadsheets, almost. Nzinga doesn't let them settle permanently, but she does allow controlled trade. Firearms for textiles. Beads for medicinal herbs. No slaves. Not anymore. That bridge, for her, has burned. One day, you escort a Portuguese trader through the capital. He's got one eye on his goods and one on the massive wooden statues lining the palace walkway, each carved to resemble an animal of local myth. Nzinga commissioned them all. We remember who we were, she tells him, even while deciding who will be. There's a scholarly debate about whether Nzinga's late career symbolism, these statues, the revived rituals, even the new coinage, was sincere spirituality or performative nationalism. Maybe both. Maybe that's the point. She knew how to walk both roads at once, sandals or not. The queen also takes a peculiar interest in education. She sets up informal schools, if you can call a reed hut with 2 benches, and one very overwhelmed scribe a school. But children learn. They copy phrases in Latin, Kimbundu, and sometimes Dutch, if they're lucky. Adults scoff, but Nzinga insists, when I'm gone, these children will remember more than songs. You meet one of these kids. She's 9, missing a front tooth, and writes her name with the confidence of a seasoned diplomat. She teaches you how to pronounce Nzinga properly. Turns out you've been getting the tone slightly wrong. You apologize to the wind. It's during this era that Nzinga begins writing letters again, more letters than ever. She sends one to the Pope, reaffirming her Christian conversion and requesting religious texts, but also suggesting the Vatican do more to discourage the other Christian powers from enslaving people. Subtle, sharp, very on brand. She writes to women rulers, too, though historians debate how many were real correspondences versus symbolic gestures. Still, one letter to a queen of the Joliffe Empire survives. It's half political briefing, half heartfelt encouragement. The world resists a woman in power, Nzinga writes, but it trembles when she persists. Back at the palace, life softens in strange ways. Nzinga begins attending public ceremonies again, one she used to avoid. She dances at harvest festivals, albeit briefly, with that awkward half-smile of someone both enjoyed herself and making sure nobody spills wine on her robes. She adopts a monkey. Yes, a monkey. It sits on her shoulder during council meetings, occasionally mimicking her hand gestures. A Portuguese chronicler calls it an impish advisor. You try not to laugh. It's accurate. Still, not everything is playful. Enemies remain. The Portuguese intensify their grip on Luanda. Rumors fly that some of Nzinga's distant allies are considering switching sides again. She doesn't panic. She just hosts another market, and quietly has a few suspicious chiefs reassigned to land reclamation duty near crocodile-infested rivers. Coincidence? Surely. And you just keep following along, holding scrolls, feeding the monkey, listening to rain tap on banana leaves, and wondering if the world outside Matamba has any idea what's going on here. Most days, you suspect they don't. You're dreaming of roasted plantains when someone rattles your reed door just before dawn. Another messenger. Another parchment tied with a red cord and smelling faintly of lemongrass. Nzinga wants you. Again. Always. When you arrive, she's pacing barefoot in the inner courtyard, a single candle guttering on a stone stand. Her monkey is nowhere to be seen, probably sleeping in a hammock somewhere with more dignity than either of you. She hands you the message without a word. It's from Luanda. Portuguese reinforcements have landed. You think there will be panic. You brace for shouting. The clamor of armor being inspected. Another wave of advisors preparing vague speeches. But Nzinga just nods slowly and mutters, "Then we must build something that doesn't burn." She means it literally. Within a week, she's begun commissioning new fortifications, not of stone, but of earth and timber, easier to repair, faster to build, designed by war captains who've been watching Portuguese gunpowder strategies and learning. She plants thorn bushes along approach routes and lays silent traps in riverbeds. You step in one during a site visit and spend the afternoon explaining that no, you're not a spy, just clumsy. Still, she's not gearing up for total war this time. Something's shifted. She's calculating, not flailing. One of her ministers calls it diplomatic brinkmanship, but you just call it Nzinga being Nzinga, always one dance move ahead of the drummer. She begins resending feelers to the Portuguese governor in Luanda. Not surrender notes, no, just invitations. Muted olive branches. Shall we discuss the cost of silence? One letter ends. Historians still argue whether Nzinga's final diplomacy efforts were sincere peacemaking or just tactical breathing room. Either way, they work, sort of. The Portuguese delay. They hesitate. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they finally realize Matamba is not just a flickering rebellion, but an actual state. Either way, they stall. And Nzinga uses every second. Meanwhile, she starts reorganizing the royal court again. Not dramatically, just enough to shift loyalties around like chess pieces. A few generals get promoted sideways. A few priests quietly retire. One notably oily advisor is sent to oversee salt imports on the southern border, a job that coincidentally places him nowhere near anything important. Then she does something nobody expects. She holds a reconciliation ceremony. Picture this. A long open hall. Fire bowls glowing like sleepy suns and nobles from rival clans all seated on woven mats, side by side. trying not to look murderous. Nzinga walks down the center, wearing her battle cape, but no weapons, just a carved staff. At the end, she lights a clay bowl of incense, circles it 3 times, and speaks a single phrase. Enough blood. Let the land drink only rain. It's simple. It's theatrical. It works. Some of the chiefs break into weeping. Others try to save face by coughing discreetly into their sleeves. But no one walks out. They stay. They listen. They sign her new accord. It's not peace exactly, but it's the closest anyone's come in years. There's a quirky story buried in that ceremony, too. Nzinga had the ceremonial staff carved from the wood of a tree that had survived a lightning strike. The locals called it the tree that argued with heaven. She liked the metaphor. Also, the staff squeaked faintly when she leaned on it. For days afterward, people joked that even her walking stick had opinions. Diplomatic breakthroughs aside, life doesn't slow. Nzinga expands her system of rotating village stewards, sort of like traveling magistrates, but with better storytelling skills. Each steward is responsible for collecting oral histories, as well as taxes. People remember who they are when someone listens, she says. You think she might be talking about herself. You follow one steward for a week and learn more about cassava than you thought possible. You also learn that half of the villages have carved little dolls of Nzinga with removable headpieces. Children use them for storytelling games. One kid insists Nzinga once flew across the river, using only her cloak and a gust of ancestral wind. You don't correct him. There's a festival that year, a big one. You're not sure what it's originally for. Probably several things. But the whole capital buzzes with it. Drums echo like heartbeats. People paint their faces in swirls and stars. Nzinga appears on the final day wearing gold-threaded cloth and carrying 2 small bowls of herbs, one bitter, one sweet. She says nothing, just walks through the crowd, letting people taste both. The symbolism doesn't need explaining. And yet, even as her internal realm solidifies, the shadows grow longer on the horizon. Portugal isn't retreating, just pausing. European merchants keep sniffing around for slave routes. The Dutch, after a brief flirtation, have shifted attention elsewhere. Nzinga knows she's running out of international rope, so she begins writing her own story. Not literally, but through a network of court scribes who start compiling what can only be described as an official Nzinga archive. Letters, edicts, victory songs, treaties, even a few old speeches translated into Portuguese. Some of it reads like propaganda. Some of it reads like poetry. There's debate among historians over how much of this archive Nzinga personally edited. Some believe she dictated it line by line. Others say it was curated posthumously. Either way, you suspect Nzinga knew her legacy would need armor as much as her armies did. The Portuguese, still entrenched along the coast, send one final emissary to Matamba that year, a weary man with a diplomatic sash and bad knees. He brings a peace offer, not perfect, not flattering, but maybe livable. Nzinga invites him to her private garden, a quiet space of stone paths, bamboo groves, and the occasional indignant bird. She listens to his speech, asks 3 questions, then offers him a drink made from tamarind and crushed mint. He coughs. Politely, she doesn't accept the terms. Not yet, but she thanks him for traveling. And that night, under a sky so wide it feels like an open palm, she tells you, empires may have clocks, but we have time. You don't sleep much that night. The sky leaks a pale dawn light across Matamba's rooftops, and you're still thinking about what she said. We have time. It lingers in your head like a riddle from a dream you can't quite remember. Nzinga, on the other hand, is already walking the palace perimeter, inspecting the new root cellars and speaking quietly with the sunrise guards. There's a sense of quiet urgency in her movements, like she knows something is shifting and wants to finish stitching the hem before the fabric unravels. This is a phase of her life where she leans heavily into the bureaucracy she's built. Not exactly thrilling, sure, but oddly soothing in its rhythms. Census records, rotating trade duties, grain quotas, oaths of loyalty recited beneath shady pavilions. Her court becomes a machine of ink and ritual. And here's a mainstream fact. Nzinga created one of the most sophisticated pre-colonial administrative systems in Central Africa, blending indigenous leadership customs with Portuguese-style governance. Village-level chieftains were tied to a hierarchy of district managers who reported directly to a central advisory council. Nzinga herself presided over it weekly, sipping honey tea and occasionally falling asleep mid-debate. Hey, even legends need naps. She restructured land ownership, too. No longer did clans rule entire valleys unchecked. Instead, land to be reassigned by the crown based on loyalty, food production, and, occasionally, how well you dance at court banquets. Okay, maybe not officially, but there was that one time Chief Loka got a whole new orchard after performing a praise song involving 4 masks and a chicken puppet. Coincidence? Not everything was perfect, of course. Dissent simmered. A few rival nobles tried to stage a revolt via poisoned yam stew. Nzinga survived it with just a stomachache and a new policy. All food tasters must rotate every 3 days and wear funny hats so nobody forgets who's tasted what. The hats didn't catch on, but the rotation stuck. You start noticing small rituals she performs alone. Every solstice, she walks barefoot to the riverbank and places 3 stones in the water. She never explains why. Some say it's a tribute to her siblings. Others whisper it's a pact with the river spirits. Historians still argue whether Nzinga truly followed traditional spiritual rites or adapted them purely for political symbolism. Then there's the long pause. Not silence, exactly, but a slow quieting of her campaigns. No battles, no treaties, just deep governing. You might call it her peaceful years, though that feels too romantic. They're more like the years of heavy stillness. A steady inhale before a final exhale. In these days, Nzinga holds audiences from a low wooden bench, legs tucked beneath her like a monk, listening more than she speaks. She begins mentoring a few chosen younger women in statecraft, giving them puzzles to solve instead of direct instructions. One day, she asks you what makes a crown heavy. You start to answer gold, responsibility, maybe the expectation of power, but she just shakes her head and whispers, memory. Memory weighs the most. You don't bring it up again. It's during this period that she begins inviting Portuguese priests back into Matamba. Yes, really, it confuses everyone, especially considering she once threw a bishop out of her court for implying that Matamba's paganism made them backward. But now, she offers them modest homes, allows limited preaching, and even debates theology with one old Jesuit who has the patience of a tortoise and the eyebrows of an opera villain. The two of them sit for hours in the courtyard, arguing gently about sin, sovereignty, and whether angels get bored watching humans eat cassava. Nzinga's religious stance has always been complicated. She was baptized once, possibly twice, took the name Anna, and later renounced Christianity when it no longer served her politically. But she never fully severed ties either. There's even a cross carved subtly into one of her garden stones. Historians still argue whether she maintained Christian faith privately or simply kept the trappings close to better manipulate colonial alliances. Either way, she made room for both the cross and the ancestral drum, and somehow neither caught fire. Now let's talk about her daily routine because, yes, it becomes a kind of legend. She wakes before sunrise, walks the perimeter of the palace with a staff shaped like a curled snake, and then attends court while chewing dried ginger root. She insists on daily updates from every district. If someone stumbles in late with missing numbers, she makes them sing the figures to the rhythm of a drum. It's embarrassing enough that it never happens twice. Lunchtime? Usually roasted fish, boiled roots, maybe palm wine if the weather's especially good. Her favorite? A sticky tamarind sauce made by her half-blind cook, who claims he once fed the same recipe to a crocodile to calm it down. You do not ask follow-up questions. She receives petitions on card with tablets, everything from land disputes to goat theft accusations. Some are serious, some less so. One reads, "My neighbor sings too loud and steals my dreams." She writes, "Share your dreams," in response, and signs it with a smirking sun symbol. There's a quirky touch to her governance style, always. She keeps a bird, some kind of parrot, that sits behind her during meetings and occasionally squawks, "That's nonsense." Nobody knows who taught it, but it interrupts just often enough to derail boring speeches. You suspect Nzinga pays it in sunflower seeds for comedic timing. By now, she's well into her 60s. You watch her walk more slowly, grip the carve staff a little tighter, pause longer between sentences. But the fire? Still there, still flickering behind her eyes like a storm building over the plains. There's one more major shift. She formally declares Matamba to be not just a kingdom, but an equal to any European power. She drafts letters to European monarchs using phrases like, "our honored equals in governance." Notably, she doesn't use deferential titles, just names and firm language. The letters are written in Portuguese, but signed in Bunda script. She commissions maps, too, not ones drawn by Europeans, but locally made depictions of the region, full of rivers, spirits, and clan histories. One map places the capital as the heart of the world, surrounded by a ring of protective animals. A unicorn appears in the north. No one questions it. These years, while quieter than her war-torn youth, carry a different kind of weight. The weight of watching, of sustaining, of teaching those who will inherit what you fought for. Nzinga becomes more like a mountain, still rooted, yet still shaping the winds around her. And just as you begin to believe she might truly outlive everyone, she begins preparing for the end, but not in fear, with intention. Nzinga sharpens her own legacy like a blade before she ever allows it to rest. There's something almost eerie in how deliberately she starts winding down the details of her own myth while still very much alive, like a playwright drafting their own final act before the curtain even begins to fall. You find her one morning carving something into a stone behind the palace. A symbol, maybe. It's half faded and deeply personal. And when you ask what it means, she just says, "So I'm not forgotten," and brushes the stone with her palm like she's patting down time itself. She's well into her 70s now. 79 to be precise, or so most records claim. Even that's debated. Historians still argue whether Nzinga was born in 1583 or a little earlier, depending on whose oral history you trust more. Either way, she's older than most monarchs ever lived to be, and she knows it. But retirement? No, Nzinga doesn't retire. She just pivots. The final years are all about consolidation. She begins reassigning territories more carefully, weaving a tighter web of trusted local leaders, some by blood, others by pure merit. She makes quiet visits to regions that once rebelled and now murmur obedience. She walks slowly, yes, but with eyes that miss nothing. And her desk, you remember that desk? The one carved from dark Angolan, rosewood with 3 hidden compartments? It gets dusted daily now, polished with oils, as if the desk itself knows it's becoming an artifact. Sometimes she stares at it for long stretches, as if reviewing every paper, every treaty it's ever held. Then there's her wardrobe. Gone are the warrior leathers, the towering headdresses with dangling beads. In their place, simpler robes, muted but elegant, still regal, just quieter, like the sound of silk against stone. She wears a bracelet made of twine grass from her childhood village, tucked under her sleeve where few can see it. You notice it one afternoon as she lifts a tea bowl to her lips and catch the faintest smile curling beneath her eyes. That day, she summons a gathering. Not a war council, not a festival. Just her circle. Advisors, healers, scholars, and a few of her adopted daughters, now grown into fearsome women of their own standing. They sit cross-legged beneath a canopy woven from bark fiber and mango leaves. Birds trill somewhere off in the branches. She begins to speak, not like a queen, but like a griot, a storyteller shaping the echoes of her life. She recalls the riverbank where her father taught her fish, the first time she heard the name Portugal, the weight of her brother's crown when she first held it in secret. Her voice doesn't tremble, but there's a pause between each memory, longer than necessary. You lean in, not wanting to miss even the silence. At one point, she says, "I fought for peace harder than I fought for war." And everyone nods because it's true. Harder still was maintaining that peace once the swords were sheathed. She makes a joke about hiding her real treaties beneath her mattress, and it gets a chuckle. You're pretty sure that one's not a joke. As she speaks, a breeze picks up, rustling the trees with the kind of hush that only happens when the air itself is listening. It feels sacred. She doesn't name an heir outright, not in the way people expect. Instead, she tells stories about several younger leaders, weaving their virtues into metaphors. The cleverness of one, the gentleness of another, the fierce loyalty of a third. It's not a throne she leaves, it's a mosaic, a web, a crown not of metal, but of memory and duty. Later, she writes more letters, one to the Pope, another to the governor of Luanda, a few to neighboring kingdoms, framed as philosophical meditations on leadership, time, and why pigeons always seem to find her windowsill no matter how often she shoos them. That last one might have been a subtle threat, but again, tone is everything. Her relationship with the Portuguese remains complex to the end. By this point, they finally acknowledge her as queen in name and deed, a massive victory, though they didn't do it with much grace. Nzinga had outlived 3 governors to get it in writing. One Jesuit priest who visits her in these final years writes that she speaks as though every word is chosen from a hidden garden of thoughts, which is a poetic way of saying she talks slowly, but you better be listening, because she never wastes a sentence. Ever. One last fringe tidbit. Nzinga once banned clocks from her palace. She said they were loud, Western things that tried to control the day instead of honoring it. She preferred the rhythm of sun's shadows, drum beats, and, occasionally, the rustle of leaves on tin roofs to mark time. You get the sense that maybe she was right. In her final months, she begins sleeping more, though never before dusk. When she dreams, she mumbles names from long ago, not just people, but places, rivers, winds. You hear her murmur Kafangando once, the name of the place where she first fought the Portuguese to a standstill many decades ago. Her lips curl up at the memory. She still signs a few documents, still tastes the stew every evening, still watches the courtyard from her shaded bench. But the bench gets cushions now, and she lets herself be helped up from it without protest. Small signs, unmistakable. One evening, just as the stars start to blink awake across the sky, she takes your hand, not hard, not in command, just to feel another hand. She says, history is not the same as truth, but it helps. And then she chuckles so softly it might just be the breeze pretending to laugh. She doesn't say goodbye. She says, keep listening. And that's how you know